Hello, welcome to Mark Langley's Horsemanship Podcast, a podcast helping people to understand their horses better, to provide solutions in a calm, connected way. I'm Jenny Langley.
And I'm Mark Langley.
In this week's podcast, we're going to talk about a particular horse called Nelson. The detail in this question comes from Julianne's situation, which might well resonate with many of you, especially if you've ever rescued a horse or have an off-the-track horse or a horse that's proving a lot to handle. Julianne, who has purchased a 9-year-old, huge 17 hand tie off-the-track thoroughbred. Now, Julianne's quite small, and so she's quite aware of the size of Nelson. Nelson has proved to be also quite a challenge, which is why we're going to try and help Julianne out today. So I'm going to give you a bit of a background. Bear with me while I tell you the story of Nelson. So Nelson had a bit of a battle in the racing stables. He would rear and fling around and run back to the yards, a move that became known as his signature move. And it was practiced many times over at the racing stables. Eventually, stable hands didn't want to enter his stable. Farriers didn't want to attend to his feet. Nelson seemed to be at odds with everyone, and eventually, after 26 races, he was retired. So in this time, he has effortlessly overpowered people and successfully practiced that signature move many times over. Now, Julianne purchased him and spelled him with a herd. Didn't do a lot with him. She wanted to just turn him out in a larger paddock in company. She was in no hurry to throw a saddle on a horse that was underweight and didn't know how to lead properly. During that year, she found Nelson to be dull. He moved slowly. He was easy to shoe for her, easy to approach in the paddock, easy to put the rug on and take it off. She felt confident and never unsafe, but he didn't really put on weight. So Julianne began feeding him 3 times a day. And then her arrival became an association with food. Training began, and she realized that he led well, started to use ground poles for posture and proprioception. Nelson didn't show any interest in training. When she pointed him towards the arena, his face would tense, his steps were slow, he would call out to the herd a few times and stare into the distance or lower his head and reluctantly walk around the sandy arena slower than a turtle. On the lunge, Nelson would either stand still, walk towards her, or take a slow walk. His proprioception over ground poles was clumsy at best. She knew something wasn't right, but it wasn't crystal clear. What she did know was that Nelson hadn't found people or training to be a positive experience in the past. So Julianne tried clicker training. He picked up the meaning of a click very quickly, and using a food reward, she got his attention into training, and wow, he learnt fast. She found that introducing this completely different approach to training served its purpose, and Nelson could enjoy training. A few months ago, Julianne moved Nelson to a different agistment paddock, which he now shares with one mare, and he's finally gained his ideal weight. But, and this is the scenario which has prompted Julianne getting in touch with us, Nelson isn't the same horse anymore. She's found he's aggressive at feed times, pinning his ears at her. Since moving, he's become far more dominant overall. And recently, he lunged at the other horse as she approached with a food bucket. The horse ducked away. Nelson redirected onto her and gave her a nasty bite. Training has gone backwards. Nelson becomes dangerous when she wants him to walk with her in hand. He only wants to walk towards the stable, the day yard, which is where the feed room is located. And the habit has got worse over the months. Now he's pulled out his signature move. He reared and struck her on the shoulder with his hoof and galloped back to the yard. Each time she walks him out of the yard, he now pins his ears, walks across her body, and picks up a trot to cut her off. Even when he's in the yard, he looks like he's annoyed when she wants to tie him for grooming or rugging. She doesn't know who this horse is. When she stands in the paddock, he will check her for food, and if she has nothing, he turns and faces the other way or walks off. She carries a flag at feed times because she doesn't feel safe. Julianne feels that everything is slipping away fast. Her confidence has evaporated, and she's worried about the safety of others as well. Finding him a different home doesn't look promising, so she knows she has to turn this into a learning experience. So, Mark, a lot to take in here. But I want to ask you first about Nelson's beginning at the racetrack. You've retrained and trained many racehorses. What can you tell us in your experience about why Nelson was so hard to handle there?
Well,
like a lot of horses I see go to the racetrack. I used to start and educate sort of some race horses to go and race, and I'd put the best start I could on them so they were soft horses just in case they weren't fast enough. And then when they're at the racetrack, hopefully they'd get treated better, because an easy horse to work with, everyone who's going to handle that horse is going to possibly be nice to that horse, because as soon as the horse is hard to handle, it gets a bad name. People don't like it. They start to treat it bad, and then the cycle continues. So, but there are a lot of horses that go, into the racing industry that, some of the people who start the horses, they just want that horse as long as it can steer, and it can carry a person right, ready to go to the trainer. And then a lot of times they live in stables. I don't believe they get the right foundation to process the I guess the worry, the anxiety that they're going to go through. I guess all the stimulant that they're going to sort of feel at the racetrack and in that environment. So they might be born in a herd, and they might be born with a bunch of mares and run around. Then all of a sudden they're stripped from that. They start to sort of go into this sort of foreign environment, stables, all sorts of things. So it becomes very sort of chaotic, and without good education and foundation to fall upon, everything starts to fall apart. So there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of unsurety, a lack of stability, all these things. And, like if you look at a normal structured herd, they sort of grow together, sort of everything they're sure of and things like that. But these horses, they get moved around, a whole bunch of things. Like I could go on for hours about all the different things that really trouble horses in the racing industry. And then I still believe there's not enough quality, good horse training gone into building these horses' foundation to prepare for what they're going to go through. And that's I think where it all starts. And then moving on from there, that, like I said, the stress that they go through it can be phenomenal. So their safe places and the things that give them good feelings become very, I guess, addictive to them and dear to them, because everything else is unsure and stressful. So that's where we get all these other problems.
So racing, not necessarily the racing itself, but just the environment, things changing, being put with different horses, put in different places, that's stressful on a horse. So is that why Nelson started to sort of have a bit of a hard, become difficult to handle for all the people that were around him? What would you think would have caused the rearing and him running back into the yard?
Yeah, so a lot of times, horses are pushed past their natural processing speed, and so they've got to process all this stuff, and it's just too much for them, and they just get frightened and they can't cope with it, and so they seek safety. And in a normal herd environment, when a horse feels unsafe, it seeks safety back at the herd. Now, if a horse doesn't feel safe with the person that it's with, and they get a lot of handlers handling them and different things like that, people feeding them all sorts of things, depending on how big the racing stable is. But they've got all this, all these different things where things are changing all the time. The pressure's changing all the time. Different people handle them very differently, putting different pressures on. And if their basic skills of leading, and if they don't trust pressure and they don't follow a feel well and they don't trust people well, then basically everyone's just putting pressure on them on top of all the environmental pressure, especially if that pressure, the guiding pressure, which should be the guiding pressure, should be the one that makes them feel good. It should be the one that kind of gives them clarity and, and then the safety that they feel around people who have taught them about that guiding pressure should be established. But a lot of these horses, that's not there. And sadly, a lot of them, just about all of them, it's not there enough. So that's where they get the huge separation anxiety from, because every time they get taken out to be trained, to go on the track, to whatever, it's a lot of stress. And so they seek their safe place. And if it's not a herd that they can't run back to and find safety with, then it's going to be the stable, the last place of rest, the stable that's got that buddy beside them, the place where they eat and drink, and the place where people leave them alone. And so they'll just go back to the place where people just leave me alone. Just like a kid will run into the library to hide from the bullies.
Right. Okay. So poor Nelson was just really trying to escape everything. It was too much for him. So along comes Julianne. She puts him in that paddock with a herd, and he was left there for about 12 months, and she would rug him and unrug him and seemingly had no problems, because seemingly he was generally left alone, which is what he needed, what he wanted for a while. So we saw him sort of go back to a horse that he wanted to be. So can you explain then why when she moved into a new paddock, which had a lot better feed, he actually finally gained weight? Was that any link to the sudden change in his personality and aggression, do you think?
No, it may have been. There could have been, and it's hard to tell exactly what flips the switch. So by the whole story, what I've read into it is he went through the stage of dullness and being shut down, but the memories and all the stuff was in there, sort of ready to unlock at some point. It's only a matter of time that unlocks, unless we can diffuse it through certain changes in our training and helping him in the right way. So what's happened is he went dull. So and in that dullness, they're kind of shut down. They're shutting out, disinterested, not really wanting to go into the arena, all that sort of stuff. It was just him. It's like the sleeping tiger that hasn't quite gotten poked again. So and then when he went into a new environment, there was a change, and maybe that change, new horses, new things, a bit of feed. The feed gives them that bit of extra energy, but it's not the food that caused the problem. It's just the food that maybe put a bit more fuel behind the mine that creates the fire. So and the change of environment could be enough of a trigger to sort of, make him go another change, and then boom, like they've woken up that sleeping tiger. So it's not that he changed, because she got him as the horse that was doing all that stuff. He was subdued for some time, but I believe he was just shut down, and then there's a trigger in the change of environment that's just woke him up.
So Julianne's had that period of time where she had some really successful training with him. So right at the start, she's noticed that he didn't show any interest in training, and his face would tense going towards the arena. Then she introduced clicker training and feed rewards, and she got some really successful training done with him. So why is it so hard for her to train now? We know that he can do it.
Well, if you look back before he was trained, when she trained with the clicker training, if you look at that, he's like stress response, trauma response. He doesn't have very good problem solving skills. And problem solving skills are, so the problems that he has in the past, the memories he has in the past are in his mind, and they're unsolved things that cause him a lot of trouble. So anytime someone pulls on his head, it's a trigger. Anytime someone does this, it's a trigger to, possibly go and seek his safe place. Okay. So clicker training might have opened him up to search and make new decisions, but just remember to get away, like his comfortable place away from all the trauma was food. In his stable, he'd eat his food, and that was his safe place. So yeah, you're going to get him to start to sort of search and go, oh, this is okay, I'll try a few things for food. But because he never goes back and solves the problems of the past, and then it's not going to last very long, because it teaches him how to try something for food until it wears out, until he's like, well, what's the point? So it doesn't get him to get rid of the trouble of the past, which is solving the problems of the boundaries, the pressures that he couldn't solve before, that caused him to be really worried because of his lack of education and overexposure. Clicker training can, and food reinforcement for a horse that's traumatized and seeks food for safety or as their safe place, can actually, as I say, might work good for a little bit, but in the long run, it'll turn around, because we're not actually getting the horse to solve the problems, just using their safe place to help them learn. But going to a safe place doesn't allow them to go into their unsafe place and figure stuff out. And that's what's happening. So now at the moment, because he's not learned how to solve problems, and there's still a problem, pressure's still a problem, all that sort of guidance that people were trying to show him as a problem, it's not going to get fixed. It has to get fixed.
Okay, Mark. So I'm starting, I think, to understand the situation. So it's like Nelson has, been in a really bad place, and he saw people as perhaps a contributor, maybe the cause, who knows, of that bad place. He didn't like what was happening to him in the racing environment. And then when Julianne got him, she took some of that stress, that pressure away, but his mindset was still in a bad place. So although she offered a bit of a break, a mental break for him, she hasn't actually shifted anything. She hasn't changed anything inside that he's thinking about, that he's feeling about. He still has issues. She's given him food. She's given him clicker rewards. He's understood all that, but his mind is still troubled. That hasn't changed fundamentally. So it's almost as if, say, I went through an awful lot of trauma, whatever, on some level, and a robot came into my home and was able to feed me, clothe me, look after me for months. They're helping me. They're maintaining my body, but they're not helping me get over my trauma. Is that what's happening with Nelson's situation?
That's right. Yeah. So food reward in training, it's the problem with food reward for him is food has been his safe place. Food has been his go-to when he's stressed. Go back to my food. And that's why he's got food aggression, because, he doesn't want to be bothered around the things that he holds dear, which are his little safe things. And it becomes like an addiction because, if you look at some people, they tend to get addicted to things sometimes more often when their life around them stress, and it kind of gives them a little kind of kick and a safe thing that kind of makes me feel good. So hence why, they're not going to let other horses in or anything around food. So food can actually be a negative because you're actually only feeding the thing that was the refuge from the problems that he had. It's not going back to the problems.
Right. Okay. So to solve Nelson's problems then, what do we do? What does Julianne do? What does anyone do who's got a horse that's clearly doing behaviour that's unacceptable,
the biggest
clearly
thing
dangerous?
is and this is the hardest
How
thing.
can they change things so that
and
horse
when I do
becomes
clinics,
in a
like
better
people might
headspace?
find it a little difficult because I actually create a little neutral stress in a horse. I have to create a problem, and it might be a small problem. Could be just I shake a flag and the horse goes, "Oh, gee, I don't like that." But then I give them a few boundaries. So obviously when they see a problem, they go, "Oh, I might move away from that," and they might, and I might say, "Well, but that certain thing's not available," and then they might softly search and process and do something different. But then because I've stimulated a little problem, got them a little anxious, and then they find a pathway of feel. That tends to be the way that I fix a lot of these problems, is create enough anxiety that they're actually starting to go, I'm awake and I'm a little challenged, and then give them an alternative. It could be just leading forward a little bit and just taking 2 steps. It doesn't have to be leading to the racetrack. It's just taking 2 steps forward or doing something simple. And that teaches them to get that level of awareness and anxiety that almost was like, I don't know what to do, and then somehow giving them a solution. I can't be very kind of exact on the exact thing that I would do with him, but I would tend to, because he has to get a little lost and start to almost, grab for those things that he used to do, but then you can give him an alternative. And then through that, you're actually exposing him to a little bit of stress and then giving him a solution so he can actually solve that problem. And then he softens a little bit and goes, oh, I did something and I fixed that. And that tends to be, I've helped so many hundreds and thousands of horses that have, had similar problems, that it's just through problem solving that they find softness. And then eventually they can actually solve big problems. And then, we look at all the tools that we give them, like we have to teach them to lead very well, trust that rope with their life. There's a whole bunch of things, but we have to kind of gently stir the hornet's nest a little bit.
So let's go back to that then. You've helped lots of horses like Nelson in quite a short space of time, because you get them at your clinics a lot. People bring them to you. You tend to be a bit of a last resort. They've tried different things. They've heard about you and like, okay, what can you do with this horse? Or, this horse has been handed down to so many different people. Finally gets to somebody who says, well, I want to do the right thing by this horse. And they bring them to you because they know that you're fundamentally there about helping horses. So just tell us, can you just briefly a little bit about what you do at a clinic? What is it that you're renowned for changing a horse's mindset. So this is quite pertinent to what this is happening here. How on earth do you go around doing that? How does it work? It can't be a straightforward process, but you do have great effect, don't you?
Yeah, well, I sort of have to, otherwise It's like, what's the point of bringing a horse? I got a policy that I used to have a policy. It was every horse I'm going to do the best I can to help it, and I kind of wanted 100% success rate. And over the years, I've got better at getting that and being able to try and help all the horses that come to clinics. But I guess the first thing I'd look at with Nelson is if Nelson came to me and he was shut down, like he was just kind of dull, the first thing I'd do was find something to wake him up, get him open, because, you can work on, a bit of connection and getting him to trust you and things like that. But the thing is about if he trusts someone and he likes them, and that's all fine. It's all very necessary. But it's still, when he's stressed, he doesn't know what to do. So that's the thing we've got to look at. So what I tend to do with horses is I'll kind of go, okay, well, I'm going to probe a little bit and I'm going to wake you up a bit. And so if they're dull, I don't teach them to do things. I would just try and wake them up somehow. So it could be simply, I'm walking along leading Nelson, and then I've got a flag and I bang the rail as hard as I can for one moment to see if that makes Nelson go, oh, geez, what was that? I'm awake. What do I do? Because otherwise he might just go around dull, not really listening to anything, and just kind of, back up heavy, do this heavy. And then all of a sudden 3 horses, can around in a paddock nearby. And then next minute Nelson's like a helium balloon, on a windy day. So I have to kind of get him to kind of come up a little bit and wake up and then see what I've got. And if so maybe, say for instance, his tactic was to run off to the last place he felt safe. Well, maybe I might lead him into the arena, and that gate's there that's closed. That's the gate he'd probably run to. I might do something there, wake him up, and he might look around. The fence is already there, so he can't run very far. And then I might be able to quickly put a little stop on him and say, well, running away is not working. And I'll set it up so I'm timing it so I can actually have myself in a position that I can actually stop him with the rope for just one moment, and then he'll stop, and then I'll stand there really quietly like I'm having a good day, having a yarn to a friend or something, and not like it didn't even happen. And I just let him kind of go process what just happened. I just spooked. I hit the boundary. I turned back around. This bloke's standing here. He's still calm. Everyone else is calm. No one's sort of on top of me. What just happened? And let him process that. And then I'll go about gently teaching him how to lead or something like that. And, without sort of having Nelson right in front of me, I don't know exactly what I do. But if I just sort of said, if what I tend to do with these horses, I say, what do you do when you're a little bit nervous? And then I watch what they do. And then I gently create, or firmly, if I need to, create a boundary to the things that I would think aren't available. But then once they find that boundary, after they've sort of let go of trying to find that boundary or what they need to do, I then let them process just what happened and then start to go, what could I do next? And I put them in a state of, I'm not sure what to do, but I'm willing to search and open up. And it's kind of hard to explain sometimes, but
yes. Okay. So you're offering them some quite clear, distinctive. You raise their emotions a bit. You heighten them awareness. You get them a little bit stressed, I suppose, as it were. But you offer them very, very distinct boundaries, as well as offering them time. So I think obviously you're very perceptive about being able to give them, knowing when to stop, when to give them space, but then when to introduce something that's quite clear. And so it becomes very constructive. But what is that doing to their mind, though? How is that helping them to get beyond this place where they find humans stressful and everything stressful?
Well, the thing happens that, like, people just put pressure on horses and it just seems like pressure, but they don't look for thought change. They don't look for search. A lot of times in these big industries, it's just like, pull them here, push them there, prod them here. And there's no, as I say, no thought change, no problem solving. Like, problem solving is a horse searching and finding an answer. Like, there's an old horseman saying, you set it up and you let the horse find the answer. And that is such a important, like, I guess, mechanism for the horse, for their brain, because they kind of go hotter, colder, door closed, door open, cool, I did it myself, and they feel good about it. The thing is you create a neutral pressure and they're not sure what to do, but then you can gently put, those, as I said, boundaries in the way. And that searching, so when they get a little worried, and they go around and they probe one thing, they probe another, and then they find an answer that they feel that gave them a little bit of a respite, and their thought changed, their emotion changed a bit. And then they go, okay, I'm okay. I just dealt with that little problem. And that little problem, because they solved it, they did that for themselves. So later on, they get better at regulating their anxiety. So it's like self-regulation of anxiety, because they know how to search and solve problems. And in his old environment, there was 100 problems coming to him, and he didn't know how to solve, and nor did he have room to solve any one of those problems. So when any problems come up, he goes, oh, there's a problem. I was just going to have a fit. Whereas, so that's why we give them one little problem at a time. And that problem has to create anxiety. It has to stimulate. And that's where people find it hard, stimulating a negative anxiety in a horse to create a positive outcome. But how much negative anxiety has he not been able to process? How many things? So it's through sorting that anxiety out and doing something about it that's not flight and just running back to safety is essential.
Okay, so the more times he gets concerned about something but realizes he has a say in the matter that doesn't involve flight, the more chances that he's going to become just a lot safer.
Yes, correct. So, and then in that process, as he learns to search, you're always there. He might sniff on you and go, yep, you're safe. And that's why, like, a lot of my training, people get a little bit confused, because they come to a clinic and say, oh, you don't use all this body language, and you don't do all this, and you don't do all that. And I say, well, these traumatized horses, all they've seen is energy and body language coming at them at 100 miles an hour. I said, I'm just going to stand here and be a calm place. And if I want to guide them, I might put a feel in a rope, but I'm not going to make it personal. I'm just going to be a stable, guiding, person who just helps them through their way. But I'm helping them help themselves by doing it in the right way. Some people, like, they nurture the stress in a horse because the horse feels so safe and connected to them that the person just kind of carries them around in their little bubble. But the horse still doesn't know how to self-regulate its own anxiety when it's standing out on its own, or, it still hasn't learned how to problem solve. It just relies on the sticky kind of calm connection of the person, much the same as the horse likes the calm stable with the food in it. They can get a little cocooned, and that's the thing. And that's why sometimes I say to people, teach your horse how to self-regulate, get it softer, teach us how to problem solve before you sort of deepen that sort of trust and connection. Well, they still kind of got to trust you, but you know what I mean? Like that connection where they kind of rely on you, because you don't want them to rely on us. You just want them to know that we're not a problem, we're safe.
Okay, it sounds amazing what you do, and it sounds quite technical. Obviously, Julianne, if you're listening to this and you can get Nelson to a clinic with Mark, we would highly encourage you to do that, because Mark can probably create the change in mindset that would really help you guys to, just start to move forwards. But, in the meantime, though, Mark, really quickly, should Julianne be giving up the clicker training or the food treats, or both? Are they help?
Well, I might cause a bit of rift on the internet, but definitely, most definitely.
Definitely. Oh, goodness. Wow. Okay. There you go, Julianne. That's something you can stop.
The biggest thing I would say is food. Just let him have his food in his comfortable place, whatever it is. Just let him still have his food as his safe place, whatever. By using food to get him to do things, it's going to last so long. But when a big problem arises, he's got to search in a different part of his brain. So the problem with food, it creates a target in their mind. There's a target. There's something I need to do to get that food, and I'm going to have to do it, and it can frustrate them.
And I'll push you over to get to.
Yeah, and he's got target behaviour already. He targets a destination, and in his mind, I don't want to solve the problem, the destination, and in his mind, the destination is his stable and food. So the problem with it is by luring the carrot or the food to sort of get him to do something. In his mind, there's a target, and if he doesn't get that target, he's going to get angry. And if he doesn't understand boundaries, because the old boundaries he didn't understand, well, those boundaries are going to represent his past. So he's going to be torn between this kind of feeling of, how do I get the target of safety or food, that good feeling of food, but I don't know how to process pressure. And then that's where you get anger and you get frustration.
Yeah. Okay. So
Because
there's a lack of
no guidance,
education
there's no
here.
boundaries.
It's probably a lack of education. It's probably not quite understanding pressure when he's at his threshold, because I know she said that he did
Yeah.
used to lead really well. Maybe we look into the leading, because it can offer very tiny, small, very positive lessons, and that is going to be a pathway for both of you to go forward. Now, final question, Mark. What if she feels that getting him above threshold, as you were talking about before, just might be a bit too much for a layperson, perhaps like me and perhaps like Julianne, to do? What if she feels, no, I'll keep him below threshold. I'll just keep doing little things, simple things that might help him. Is that a good way forward for now?
Sorry, I missed part of the question, but I guess little simple things, like I could give you some ideas, like a simple idea is don't go and do stuff with him. Go out and, I mean, you might put a holder on him. Don't go and do big training on him. Just get him to be aware of your space. A simple thing, just be aware of my space. Maybe make your space 2 or 3 meters. Don't go at him, fondle him, pat him, handle him. Don't sort of go in and go on him, because you're just until he's soft, you're just another human. And I know you might think, I've had him for a while and he likes me, but you're like, I think he still feeds off the good things that people give him, but he also says, but you're a provider of bad things too, because you're still a human. So until he can sort of start to get a little softer in his perception of people, I would, like, maybe you have to get in on him to put a holder on him, but then I would sort of stand back and just do leading lessons where he has to stay about 3 meters from you and just lead just in a very small space, like not taking him anywhere away from safety. Just teach him to lead a little bit and then beware of that 3 meter, and eventually 2 meters. So he's just aware he's in his own space without a person with him. You're in your space, and just keep it simple. Pull on a rope a little bit, get him to take 2 steps towards you, let him stop, be aware of your space, and just teach him to be generally aware and ask him simple questions. What I say to people is, do a little, expect a lot. And what I mean by that, like a simple thing is, when I pick up on a rope, be aware. Thank you. Simple. Where some people pick up on a rope and lead a dead horse and get it to do all these things, and it's still kind of dull at the end of the lesson. So to me, awareness, all that sort of stuff, searching and just get him aware that you're strong and you do what you do. You're confident in your own ground, and then if he thinks he can just walk into that space, I don't care if you pop a flag or do something, it might spook him. Do it in a small enough yard that he's not going to run off, and don't just perfect it till he's so you're going, oh, this is easy. I've just got to kind of follow the rope a few steps, be aware of her, don't push in her space. And she's calm and I'm calm, and she's not bullying me and pushing me around. She's not hanging off me. She's not making me do all these things. And just get him present and responsible for his self, responsible for knowing, where you are, where he is. And then you can move on from there. But you've got to get one thing working. Just one simple thing. Yeah. And as I say, I would prefer to do that before connection, because, trying to make friends with him and get him to trust you without, like any horse that I open up that's been shut down. And like I said this to a few people, like when I was going through the States, there was a lot of shut down horses that I was trying to open up and help people with. And I said, the problem is some people open up their horses without guidelines, and then they've opened up Pandora's box. And then next minute they've got this fire-breathing dragon standing in front of them that doesn't know what to do. So I say, when I open up a horse, there's still boundaries, there's still guidelines. No matter how much my heart bleeds for the trauma that they've been through, they have to come out being aware of themselves and us. And then they can actually slowly kind of evolve into the world a lot better.
That's amazing. And we're going to have to wrap it up, Mark. I know that you and I can talk about issues like this for, till the cows come home. But let's just sum it up for Julianne and for everyone else that's finding this quite relevant, helpful for them. So for Julianne, let's, just focus on how aware Nelson is, how soft he is, how he's perceiving people. So rather than getting him to see, rather than you go to him and get him to do something, let's just forget the arena. Let's forget anything. Let's just get him to see you in a different way. So let's introduce boundaries. Let's introduce tiny, tiny little positive tasks. Focus on something that he does perfectly. So like Mark says, 3 soft steps and then stop and wait. Just ask him to do that, get him to do that. Yes, he may pin his ears back, but once he understands what you're asking, the lead rope's going to be a pathway for him to focus on, to go, this is all I have to do. And then, maybe take him back. Don't worry about that arena, because that's the whole big issue. And he doesn't need that right now. He just needs to see people in a different way. So I hope this episode has been helpful for everybody. Mark, it's been fascinating to listen to you again. And, I like sort of divulging on one particular area and really sort of nutting it out. And if you're listening to this and you like nutting out the psychology behind horses and how on earth we can help them, for goodness sake, go and watch Mark at a clinic. It's so worth it to see how he is doing the shifts that he's doing, how he's able to sort of alter his training for each horse as it needs it, depending on the situation that he's reading and how he's reading it. He does explain a lot of detail what he's doing. So I do really encourage you to get along to a clinic. We are actually going to release, and 26 clinics will be released in September. So something to watch out for. The dates will come up. So if you're not on our newsletter list, sign up, and then you can get the details about the clinics, and you can also get the lowdown so you can get in there to book. We will be back again with another podcast in a week's time. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you, everybody.
If you'd like to ask Mark your question and get his insights to help you and your horse, it's easy to join Mark Langley online. Head over to marklangley.com.au and hit join. It's less than a couple of coffees, and the Q&A is just a piece of a whole package designed to support you and your horse with great training.